The sound her arm made, a sickening, brittle snap, will never leave my mind. It was the kind of sound that doesn't just echo in your ears, but lodges itself deep in your bones. My pregnant wife let out a scream so raw and terrified. It shattered something inside me before anything else could. I dropped the groceries I was holding. Glass shattered around my feet. My heart was already sprinting, but time slowed to a crawl. 3 men stood over her in our front yard. They wore dark uniforms with shiny, official-looking badges stitched to their chests. HOA enforcement, it said, but their eyes didn't carry the bored indifference of neighborhood bureaucrats. No, there was something else in them. Something feral. One of them had just slammed her against our fence, like she was some trespasser on her own lawn. Her swollen belly pressed against her dress, trembling from the shock. She was screaming and trying to shield our baby, even as one of the men twisted her broken arm behind her like a cop pinning down a criminal. Her knees gave out. I think she was going to faint. And that's when I saw red. I didn't ask questions. I didn't shout. I didn't wait. I reached behind the door frame, where I drilled the holster into the wall after the break-in last year. My fingers curled around the cold grip of the Glock 19. Safety off. I stepped out of the doorway. The moment they saw me, 2 of them froze, but the third, the one holding her, turned his head slowly like this was a game to him. His eyes locked on mine, calculating. And then, I raised the gun. I didn't blink. My finger hovered over the trigger. One warning. Just one. I said, "Step away from my wife. Now." No one moved. She whimpered, and I saw her eyes, glassy, half-lucid, pleading. One more second, and I'd have waited too long. So I made the choice. But before I tell you what happened next, let me tell you how we even got here. If someone had asked me a year ago what my version of the American dream looked like, I would have answered in a heartbeat. A quiet cul-de-sac, a safe neighborhood, a backyard with a grill, and a cozy nursery ready for the little one on the way. My wife, Hannah, and I weren't rich, not even close, but we'd saved, worked extra hours, cut vacations, and sold my motorcycle just to get here. We bought the house in May. It was a pale, gray, 2-story home with white shutters and a freshly mowed lawn. The neighborhood, nestled just outside a small town in Virginia, felt like something out of a Hallmark movie. Kids rode their bikes in packs down the street, people waved when they passed, and dogs barked in fenced yards, not in fear, but in joy. Everyone smiled. Everyone seemed nice. After years of working in cybersecurity and Hannah teaching special education, this was our upgrade, our forever home. We didn't care that it came with an HOA. In fact, at the time, it seemed like a benefit. A clean neighborhood, standards enforced, neighbors who cared. That's what the realtor told us. What they didn't tell us was that this HOA wasn't normal. The day we moved in, a man in his late 50s approached us before the moving truck even left. His name was Mr. Halverson, and he introduced himself as the president of the Homeowners Association. Tall, stern, with a military-style haircut and mirrored sunglasses, he extended his hand like a CEO welcoming a new recruit. "We're happy to have you here," he said. "Just remember, we keep things tight on Maple Lane. No surprises." I remember laughing nervously, brushing it off as just neighborhood pride. He handed us a printed HOA welcome packet, glossy, well-organized, filled with rules. No cars parked on the street overnight. No lawn ornaments taller than 2 feet. No flags of any kind unless they were American. No window air conditioners. No backyard sheds visible from a street. No exterior paint without prior approval. Strict? Sure, but I shrugged. I dealt with worse rules in college dorms. Hannah and I just wanted peace, a place where she could rest and grow our baby safely. And for the first few weeks, it really did feel perfect. Every morning, I'd watch her sip ginger tea on the porch as the sun came up. I built a small garden bed for her tomatoes. We painted the nursery a soft sage green and argued about crib styles. She started playing classical music in the baby's room. I swear the whole house felt alive with anticipation. Then, things began to shift, small at first. It started with a note, not a knock. We found it taped to our door one Tuesday morning. Violation notice. Trash bins left out past 9 a.m. Second warning will result in fine. Second warning? There hadn't even been a first. Then came another. Front hedge exceeds regulation height by 2 inches. And another. Curtains in master bedroom are not a neutral shade. Please change to beige or white. They weren't written in a neighborly tone, no, welcome to the community, or please consider. These were cold, typed, and signed by HOA Enforcement Division. Hannah was the first to call it out. It's like they're watching us, she said one night, folding laundry. Who even sees our hedge from the sidewalk? It's behind a tree. At first, I played the skeptic. They're just strict. It's the suburbs. But I started noticing things too, like the white sedan parked down the street that never seemed to move, or how we'd go to the store and return to find footprints in our mulch, or the gate slightly open. One time, the sprinkler was running, and we hadn't turned it on. Then there were the people, 3 men, all dressed in black polos with a faint silver HOA logo on the chest, began patrolling the neighborhood. They'd walk the sidewalk slowly, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning each yard like they were casing a target. One of them even bent down once and measured a gap in someone's fence. I asked a neighbor about them, a kind older lady named Mrs. Riley who always left out birdseed. She just shook her head and whispered, "They're not like the HOA we used to have. Something changed 2 years ago. They show up whenever they want. Don't trust them." One afternoon, I saw one of the officers, a younger guy with a buzz cut and visible tattoos under his sleeve, lingering near our side gate. I walked out calmly, phone in my hand. "Need help?" I asked, voice firm. He looked up with a half smile that never touched his eyes. "Just doing routine perimeter checks. You've got some exposed soil near the fence line. Could cause runoff." "I didn't request any check," I said. He nodded slowly, almost mockingly. "Well, it's mandatory for all HOA properties." I called the HOA number listed in the welcome packet. It went straight to voicemail. No callback. No email reply either. That night, Hannah cried. She just entered her 3rd trimester, and the stress was starting to take a toll. I tried to calm her, but honestly, I was starting to feel it too. Something wasn't right. The final straw came when we received a fine for excessive noise levels on a night when we weren't even home. We'd been at Hannah's sister's place 3 towns over for dinner. We had phone, GPS data, and photos to prove it. I appealed. The fine doubled for failure to comply. It no longer felt like we were being watched. It felt like we were being hunted. At night, I started keeping the porch light on, then the hallway light, then a baseball bat under the bed. I rechecked the locks before sleeping. I started parking my truck in the garage, not just in the driveway. Not for safety, but so they couldn't see if I was home. And that dream neighborhood? It now felt like a beautifully wrapped trap. Even as the baby's due date neared, even as Hannah tried to stay hopeful, there was a growing sickness in our home, a slow suffocation. Something evil was pretending to be order. Something brutal was wearing a badge stitched with enforcement. But the worst part? We hadn't even seen what they were capable of yet. Not until the day they crossed the line and shattered everything. At first, we tried to keep our heads down. After the ridiculous, excessive noise, fine. For a night, we hadn't even been home. Hannah and I agreed not to fight it. "Let's just pay it and move on," she said softly, her hand resting protectively over her belly. I could see it in her eyes, though. Fear had crept in. This wasn't just bureaucracy anymore. This was something else entirely. I wrote the check, sealed it in the envelope, and dropped it into the HOA mailbox at the community center myself. There were cameras there. I made sure to look directly into one. I wanted them to know I was watching back. But paying didn't stop them. 2 days later, we received another notice. Unauthorized vehicle, non-compliant tint. It was addressed to me and referenced my work truck. The same truck that had passed Virginia State inspection less than a month earlier. I was furious. I called the local DMV office and asked for clarification on legal tint limits. I even took the truck to a local garage where they tested it well within range. I brought the proof to the HOA office. But again, the office was closed. Lights off. Phone still going to voicemail. No website login worked. The email address bounced back my messages. That's when the neighbor appeared. Her name was Carla. She lived 5 houses down and walked a tiny Yorkshire Terrier named Blue. We'd waved at her dozens of times, but never really spoken. She waited until I was getting my mail one afternoon and called out, "You're the couple with the baby on the way, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, just a couple months left now." She hesitated, glanced around, then leaned in slightly and lowered her voice. "Be careful. They're not who they say they are." I furrowed my brow. "What do you mean?" She took a step closer. "The HOA. Those guys walking around? They're not from the board. The real HOA dissolved a year ago, after the scandal." My heart skipped. "What scandal?" She shook her head. President was caught embezzling thousands. When he resigned, the rest of the board quit. They never filled the seats again. No meetings. No official enforcement team. But 2 months later, those guys started showing up. Same uniforms. Same rules. But no accountability. No paper trail. And no one can tell me who they work for. I stood there stunned. She gave a nervous smile. "Watch your back," she whispered, "and don't let them see your wife alone." I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Hannah. I told her everything Carla said. She clutched her stomach and leaned back into the pillows. "So, they're just pretending to be the HOA? What the hell does that even mean?" "It means we've been reporting to nobody," I said, "paying fines to someone, but not a real organization. They're just playing dress up, and we've been their targets." We argued briefly about whether to call the police, but I was already feeling defeated. What would we say? "Hi, we think some fake HOA guys left a note about window tint and might be stalking us." Unless they physically harmed someone or broke into her home, we'd sound like paranoid suburbanites. But I couldn't sit still. That weekend, I installed 4 security cameras, one over the garage, one facing the street, one covering the backyard, and one on the porch. I used a motion-sensitive model that pinged alerts to my phone and stored footage to the cloud. I even got a fake lawn sign that said, "Monitored 24/7 by active security," just to spook them. By the following Monday, I had my first clip. At 3:42 a.m., a tall man wearing a black HOA enforcement shirt walked onto our driveway. He didn't touch anything. He didn't even look around. He just stood there, hands on his hips, staring directly into the lens, for 30 seconds. Then he left. Hannah watched the clip with her hand over her mouth. "What does he want?" she whispered. That's when I saw it. Behind him, barely visible at the edge of the frame, was a second figure crouched near the back corner of our house by the garden bed. He stayed just outside the range of the porch light. I zoomed in, enhanced the shadows, and saw a glint of metal. A tool? A knife? We called the sheriff's office. They sent a deputy out the next day. His name was Warren, young, polite, and clearly used to nonsense calls about loud dogs or neighbor disputes. I showed him the footage. He whistled softly. "That's not nothing," he said. "But do you recognize them? Have you had other complaints?" Warren hesitated. "Look, off the record, you're not the first. We've had a few calls from this neighborhood, mostly vague stuff. Suspicious people, fines with no paper trail, odd late-night activity. But nothing stuck. No one's ever gotten name. No arrests. And since they're not breaking in, it's hard to press charges. Can't we get a patrol out here?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I'll flag it. Maybe swing by when I'm on this side of town." But that night, they came back again. This time it was 2:17 a.m. Same man in black. But now he walked up to the porch, bent down, and did something to the camera wiring. The feed went black. By the time I got the alert and rushed outside with a flashlight, he was gone. But something else had changed. The front door handle had fresh scratches on it, like someone tried picking the lock. I called Warren again. Left 2 voicemails. No callback. By now, Hannah was terrified. She stopped going out alone. Closed all the curtains. Jumped at the sound of delivery trucks. She said she felt someone watching her when she stood at the sink. I believed her. One afternoon, I found her sitting in the nursery, tears in her eyes, just stroking the edge of the crib. They want to scare us, she said quietly. And it's working. I hugged her and made a silent promise. I wouldn't let these people get near her again. I started digging deeper. I ran background checks on the property management company listed on the HOA documents. Their license had expired over a year ago. I traced the payment address on the fines. It led to a P.O. box at a strip mall 20 minutes away. No business name, just initials. R.D. Management LLC, a company with no online presence, no website, no reviews. I even visited the strip mall one day. The P.O. box was inside a shipping store run by a bored teenager who wouldn't give me any info. Said he just rented boxes and didn't know what people did with them. But as I walked back to my car, I noticed a familiar sedan parked across the lot, white with tinted windows. It followed me as I left, just for a block, then turned off. That night, I stood by the window for 2 hours, Glock in hand. The final escalation came 1 week later. I came home from a work meeting late. It was dark and the house was quiet. Hannah texted earlier that she was going to bed early. Baby had been kicking nonstop. But when I stepped into the hallway, I noticed something. The back door was open, just slightly. I walked in slowly, heart pounding, weapon drawn. I checked each room, clearing corners like I'd seen in YouTube tactical videos. Nothing was missing. Nothing appeared disturbed. But in the hallway near the laundry room, I found something that didn't belong, a boot print. Fresh, still damp from the rain, facing toward the baby's room. I ran upstairs, heart racing. Hannah was asleep, unharmed. But the nursery door? It was cracked open, and something on the crib, railing, a smudge. Like someone had touched it. That was it. I didn't care if it made me sound crazy. I didn't care if the cops rolled their eyes. I was going to protect my family by any means necessary. And if these people ever came back, they wouldn't leave the same way they arrived. It was a Wednesday, cold, overcast, and still. The kind of stillness where even the birds seemed quiet. Hannah was home alone. I had driven out early to meet with a private investigator I'd hired to look into R.D. Management LLC. I was running on no sleep, no caffeine, just rage and instinct. I didn't trust the police anymore. I didn't trust anyone. The investigator's office was in a cramped, dusty building, and the man himself, a balding, wiry guy named Langley, looked like he hadn't blinked since the late 90s. But he was sharp. He slid a manila folder across the desk. Your gut was right, he said. R.D. Management is a shell. No staff, no board. Just one name tied to the filings, Caleb Royce. Lives 3 towns over. Guess what he did before this? What? Private security. Dishonorably discharged. Multiple complaints of excessive force. Open investigation pending. My stomach twisted. Langley leaned back. This guy's playing a game in your house? It's the board. At 12:12 p.m., my phone rang. It was Hannah. I picked up, smiling slightly. Hey, baby. I've got something. She cut me off. Her voice was ragged, panicked, whispering. They're here. What? I was in the kitchen, and they didn't knock. They came in Zane. Through the back door. 3 of them. Are you okay? She was sobbing. I locked myself in the nursery. I think they're still downstairs. I can hear them talking. My mind snapped into one single track. Get home. Now. I ran to my truck and peeled out of the parking lot. I didn't care about red lights. I didn't care about traffic. I called 911 as I drove, shouting into the speakerphone. There are men inside my home. My pregnant wife is locked upstairs. Armed intruders, HOA impersonators. They said officers were en route. I didn't wait. I reached the house in 7 minutes. The front door was ajar. I left the engine running, stepped out quietly, weapon already drawn, and moved toward the porch. I could hear voices inside. Calm, deliberate. She's upstairs. One said, we just scare her. Make the husband come back. That's it. A low chuckle followed. Or maybe we make her sign the house over while we're at it. Another responded, she's carrying. You think she's gonna fight? Rage exploded inside me. I pushed the door open and moved fast. The living room was empty, but muddy boot prints led toward the hallway. I stepped carefully, avoiding creaks in the floorboards. One of them was standing by the kitchen island, back turned, rifle slung, casually on his shoulder. He turned just in time to see me level the Glock. "Don't move," I said coldly. "Drop it. Now." His eyes widened, but before he could react, I fired. The bullet hit the granite counter inches from his hand, a warning shot. The sound boomed through the house like thunder. He stumbled backward, arms up. "Whoa, whoa, easy, man. It's just a misunderstanding. You broke into my house. My wife is upstairs, terrified. You think I'm here to talk?" Another voice shouted from the hallway. "Zane! Zane! Hannah!" I turned toward the stairs, just in time to see a second man appear at the top. He had Hannah by the arm. No, by her broken arm. Her face was twisted in agony, tears streaming down. She was trying to fight him off with her good hand, but he had at least 80 pounds on her. He yanked her downward hard. Her arm bent the wrong way. And I heard it. That same sound. That sickening, unbearable snap. I saw red. Time slowed. I fired once. The shot missed him by inches, but he dropped her instinctively. She crumpled at the top of the stairs, moaning in pain. I bolted up the steps as the man raised both hands. "Don't shoot. Jesus." I slammed him against the wall, yanked a zip tie from his belt, and bound his wrists. I didn't even realize I was screaming until my throat started to burn. "You touch her again, and I will bury you in the backyard." The third man tried to run. He didn't make it past the porch. Blue and red lights bathed the walls as the first cruiser pulled up. Sirens wailed in the distance. For a second, it all felt unreal, like we'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. The police took them in, all three. Only one resisted. The others cried like children once the cuffs clicked. Hannah was rushed to the ER. Hairline fracture to the humerus. Severe bruising. But the baby... Thank God the baby was safe. I sat beside her hospital bed for 5 hours, not speaking, just holding her hand. I'd failed. I was supposed to protect her. And still they got in. When the detective came to take my statement, I didn't hold back. "We told you. We all told you. These guys weren't legit. And now, look what they did." He nodded solemnly. "We've connected them to at least 6 other neighborhoods across the state. Same playbook. Impersonation, extortion, forced access. This time, though," he looked at Hannah. "This time they went too far." That night, I went home alone. The house felt hollow. I walked through the rooms slowly, noticing every dent, every scuff. I stopped in the nursery. The crib was still there, a mobile slowly spinning above it, quietly playing Twinkle, Twinkle. The light flickered once, then steadied. I locked every door, double-checked every window. And then I drilled the camera wires into the siding hidden from sight. I bought floodlights, motion sensors, and a backup power source. I was done playing nice. The nightmare wasn't over, but the rules had changed. From this point forward, I was the one watching them. 3 days passed. Hannah was discharged from the hospital with her arm in a sling, doped on painkillers, exhausted but defiant. She didn't say much during the drive home. She didn't have to. Her silence said everything. This was war now. We had cops outside the house that night. 2 squad cars, 1 unmarked unit down the street. The detective, Sergeant O'Connell, assured us, "We've got eyes on you now. These guys won't be coming back." But somehow, that didn't comfort me. Because the worst part wasn't the break-in. It wasn't the fake uniforms or the broken arm, or even the thought of them trying to hurt our unborn child. It was this: we still didn't know who else was involved. The 3 men they arrested were just foot soldiers, enforcers, the ones doing the dirty work. But someone higher up had orchestrated all of it. Someone had bought the uniforms, drafted the fake fines, paid for the fake logo, the security cars, the mailbox, the fake LLC, the whole operation. And whoever that person was, they were still free. I spent the next 2 nights obsessing. I barely ate, barely blinked. My laptop was open at all hours, browser tabs scattered like confetti, bouncing between county records, court cases, Reddit conspiracy forums, and HOA abuse exposés. And then I found him. Caleb Royce. Langley had mentioned the name, but the more I dug, the worse it got. Royce had been dishonorably discharged from a private security firm in Florida after a string of violent accidental confrontations with homeowners. He moved to Virginia a year later and registered RD Management, but not as a property management group, as a consultancy. Consulting who? No one knew. There were no employee listings, no contact number, just an address in a warehouse District 2 counties over. According to Google Maps, it was registered as closed, but Street View showed something else. A black SUV, a steel roll-up door, a side office with barred windows. It didn't look like a company that was closed. It looked like a bunker. I brought it to O'Connell. He raised an eyebrow as I showed him the folder. "You did all this in 2 days?" I nodded. "I used to work in cybersecurity. I know where people try to hide." He skimmed the printouts. "You're saying this guy was the puppet master?" "Yes, and he's still out there." He sighed. "The 3 guys we arrested aren't talking. Lawyers, all of them. Paid in cash. No names, no records. But this gives us probable cause." He stood up. "You want to come with me when we check it out?" I stared at him. "Legally, I have to say no," he added. "But off the record, I get it. You want closure." I didn't even hesitate. I want justice. The warehouse wasn't abandoned. When we arrived, it was 3 p.m., sunny, traffic buzzing in the distance. The structure looked dead from the outside, gray, unmarked, with graffiti on one side. But inside, someone had been there recently. Footprints in the dust, a warm coffee cup, a paper map pinned to the wall, with our neighborhood circled in red. My heart stopped. There were other circles, too. 7 of them. All local communities with HOAs. All gated. All within an hour's drive. Are these his next targets? I asked quietly. O'Connell said nothing. He was staring at the whiteboard next to the map. On it, scribbled in red marker, were names. Mine. Hannah's. Carla Riley. Mrs. Beck. Deputy Warren. People who had questioned the HOA. People who'd spoken up. They were all on a list. We didn't find Royce that day, but we found enough to issue a warrant. A week later, he was arrested at a highway gas station, wearing a fake mustache and driving a rental car under an alias. He had 6 burner phones, $30,000 in cash, and a flash drive full of neighborhood schematics. Turns out, Royce had created a blueprint, a suburban extortion model. Pretend to be HOA officers, issue fines, intimidate, isolate homeowners, buy their silence, or force them to sell and grab the real estate through shell companies. It was a legalized scam, and we were just one of many. But even after Royce was behind bars, something didn't sit right. That feeling of being watched hadn't gone away. The camera footage showed no new intrusions. The police patrols had increased. The neighbors had rallied, lit up their porches at night, and started having meetings again. Still, it felt like something lingered. And that's when the second wave of doubt hit me. What if there were more? What if Royce wasn't alone? The way the operation ran, the funding, the coordination, the silence, it didn't feel like a one-man show. It felt like something bigger, something well-practiced. Royce may have been a ringleader, but not the architect. One night, while Hannah slept beside me, I got up and went outside. I stood at the edge of the lawn, barefoot, looking out across the cul-de-sac. The street lamps flickered. A dog barked faintly in the distance. It looked peaceful, normal, but I knew better now. I walked to Carla's house, the neighbor who warned us first. She was awake, reading by the window. She let me in without a word. "I need to know everything," I said. "About before. About the original HOA. What really happened when it dissolved." She nodded slowly. "I thought you'd ask." She poured tea, sat across from me, and began to tell a story that went deeper than I expected, about property takeovers, a missing treasurer, and a lawyer who dropped off the grid. It wasn't over. Not even close. That was the night I realized something that changed me. Sometimes the monster doesn't come through the window. It comes through the front door, wearing a badge, holding a clipboard, speaking politely until it doesn't. It was exactly 6:42 p.m. when it happened. I remember the time clearly because I had just checked the baby monitor app on my phone and smiled. Our daughter's heartbeat, soft and steady, blinked in rhythm. Hannah was in the kitchen trying to fold laundry with one arm, laughing at herself as she dropped the same burp cloth for the third time. For the first time in days, the house didn't feel like a war zone. I went out front to grab the package I'd been expecting, new security signage to mount by the driveway. I opened the front door, stepped onto the porch, and froze. There they were, 3 of them. Again. But this time, no black uniforms. No logo. No clipboards. Just plain clothes. One in a hoodie. One in a flannel jacket. One in a polo shirt. All carrying themselves with the same trained stillness I'd seen before. The kind of stillness that usually precedes something violent. They were walking down the sidewalk, slow, steady, their faces unreadable. I turned and stepped back inside, locked the door. "They're back," I said, my voice low. Hannah looked up, alarm rising in her face instantly. The same ones. No uniforms. But yes, I know it. She was already walking toward the stairs. "I'm going to the nursery." I nodded. "Call 911. Stay locked in." And then they knocked. 3 polite knocks. I didn't answer. Seconds passed. Another knock. Then a voice, deep, calm like customer service. "Mr. Walker? Zane Walker? We just want a moment of your time. We'd like to clarify a few things about the charges your wife filed. There's been a lot of misunderstanding." I didn't respond. I moved silently to the entry table where the Glock was hidden beneath a stack of mail. My hand closed around it. Cold metal. Familiar weight. I slid the safety off. Behind the door, one of them whispered to the others. Then, crack, the sound of the door frame splintering echoed through the house. They were coming in. I backed up slowly, gun raised. My heart thudded so loud I could hear it in my ears. My breathing became sharp, fast and shallow, but my hand was steady. The door slammed open. The first man stepped through like he owned the place. Then came the second. The third stayed outside, keeping watch. "Where's your wife, Zane?" one of them said casually, eyes scanning the room. "We just need to talk to her. Let her know the charges are being reevaluated." I didn't answer. He took another step, then another, and then I saw him pull something from his jacket. It wasn't a gun, but it looked like a stun baton, the kind used for compliance. That's when Hannah screamed. The sound was blood-curdling, piercing, full of pain. I turned toward the stairs. She was being dragged down, one arm limp, the other trying to grab the railing. Her legs kicked weakly, her face contorted in agony. They had her. The second man was hauling her like a rag doll. She screamed again, clutching her belly. "Let me go. You're hurting the baby." Something snapped inside me. Not her arm this time. Mine. My control. I fired. One shot into the ceiling. The room froze. Even the man dragging Hannah paused. "Put her down," I said, voice like stone. The first man turned slowly, hands spread. "You don't want to do that." I already did. I stepped forward, muzzle pointed dead center at his chest. "Let her go." "You're going to kill someone over a misunderstanding?" He smirked. "No misunderstanding," I said. "You broke into my home. You laid hands on my pregnant wife. This is self-defense now." The man dragging Hannah dropped her, hard. She crumpled onto the floor with a gasp. I moved fast, placing myself between her and them, keeping the gun high. "If either of you so much as breathe too hard," I warned, "you'll be waking up in traction." And that's when the third one, the lookout, decided to play hero. He burst in through the kitchen side entrance, thinking he'd flank me. But he hadn't counted on the baby monitor app. A red light blinked. Motion sensor. Downstairs hallway. I turned and fired before he even made it into full view, a warning shot into the floorboards. The bullet splintered wood. He screamed and dove backward, hitting the doorframe with a thud. And then, finally, the sirens. They must have tripped the new motion perimeter sensors. I'd connected them to a direct 911 alert system. Red and blue lights spilled through the windows. Tires screeched outside. Doors slammed. "Get on the ground." "Drop it. Hands in the air." The 3 men ran. Only 2 made it past the front steps. The third, the one who dragged Hannah, didn't get far. I tackled him as he reached the porch, knocking the wind from his lungs. He gasped and swung at me, but I dodged. Adrenaline made me faster, stronger. I pressed the barrel of the Glock into his collarbone and hissed, "You think you're tough? You broke a pregnant woman's arm. You terrorized my family. If you ever freeze." I raised my hands as 2 officers rushed forward, cuffing him and pulling me back. "It's okay," I said. "He's the one." They arrested all 3. This time, with hard evidence and video footage, the case couldn't be brushed aside. These weren't just impersonators. They were part of a larger web, Royce's second wave, the ones sent to silence us after his arrest. We'd rattled the cage. The animals had come out, but they failed. And in doing so, they exposed everyone else hiding in the shadows. Hannah was taken to the hospital again, shaken, bruised, but safe. Our daughter's heartbeat remained steady. The doctors said it was a miracle there were no complications. We sat in the hospital bed that night, holding hands, staring at the ceiling. "I thought we were going to die," she whispered. I tightened my grip. "Me too." There was a long pause. Then she said, "But you saved us." That night, I didn't dream. I sat in the nursery, holding the Glock on my lap, rocking slowly in the wooden chair I'd built. Because the war wasn't over. But now, they were the ones afraid. The dust hadn't even settled from the raid on our home when the questions began flooding in. The news vans were the first to show up, parking just outside the police perimeter, cameras snapping, reporters shouting things like, "Was this a hostage situation? And is it true you fired shots with your pregnant wife inside?" The police gave no comment. I gave them even less. Because deep down, I didn't care about headlines or sympathy. I wanted justice, and I wanted it loud. 3 men were taken into custody that night, and this time, they weren't protected by silence. The man I'd tackled, his name was Grant Vickers. Turns out, he wasn't just muscle. He was one of the architects of the entire scam, second only to Caleb Royce. He'd worked in security collections and, most disturbingly, repossession. That's how he knew the system, how to create fake notices, how to forge signatures, how to exploit legal gray areas. He wasn't a thug. He was a strategist in a hoodie. Under interrogation, Vickers cracked. He gave up names, addresses, even a playbook, an actual document outlining how their HOA scam was supposed to work in each target community. The plan was methodical: choose quiet neighborhoods with existing HOAs that were either disbanded or weak. Forge paperwork. Hire men to pose as enforcement officers. Issue small fines first, test the response. Then escalate. Use intimidation, surveillance, and psychological pressure to make homeowners comply, sell, or disappear. Properties were funneled to shell companies. Resold. Laundered. Profits split at the top. It was a full-blown criminal operation, hiding behind community rules. And we had exposed it. Detective O'Connell called me 2 days later. "We raided 2 more sites," he said. "One was in Stafford, the other outside Roanoke. We found uniforms, badges, a wall full of neighborhood maps. Your cul-de-sac was just 1 pin on a board." "How many?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "We think they operated in at least 13 neighborhoods over 3 states. Virginia, Maryland, and parts of North Carolina. Possibly more. Some victims didn't even realize they were being conned. They thought their HOA just got stricter. And no one ever questioned it?" "Most people did," he replied, "but only after it was too late. Fines led to threats. Threats led to fear. And fear keeps mouths shut." The more we learned, the darker it got. Royce had developed legal-looking templates for violations, fines, lien notices, even foreclosure threats. He knew how to exploit the law's inertia. A fake letter with an official seal can cause real panic, especially when it comes from a group claiming to be your community's authority. People paid out of fear. Some moved. A few even sold their homes below market just to escape. But the real kicker? Some police officers and attorneys had unknowingly cooperated. They weren't corrupt, just misled. A few had verified documents without realizing they were fabricated. Others had responded to noise complaints or trespassing reports, believing they were enforcing HOA guidelines. Royce's scam worked not because it was invisible, but because it wore the perfect disguise: order. The case went federal. FBI agents got involved. So did housing regulators, state attorneys, even Homeland Security at one point, since there was suspicion that foreign shell companies were being used to clean the money. In total, 18 people were arrested. 6 were charged with conspiracy to defraud. 4 others were caught attempting to flee the country. One of them, a woman named Lizette Ward, the accountant behind RD Management, was detained at JFK Airport with $120,000 in her suitcase and a plane ticket to Morocco. The House of Cards had officially collapsed, and somehow we had been the ones to knock it over. Hannah testified in court, her arm still healing. She stood in front of the courtroom and described everything: the surveillance, the threats, the break-in, the pain. She didn't cry. She didn't even tremble. Her voice was calm, dangerously calm, as she looked Royce straight in the eyes and said, "You tried to scare a pregnant woman into silence, but you made a mistake. You gave me something to fight for." The room was silent when she finished. Even the defense attorney looked shaken. During the sentencing, the judge delivered a line I'll never forget. This wasn't just a financial scam. It was a war on people's sense of safety, their homes, their families, their peace. And in the end, you weren't just criminals in costume. You were predators. Royce got 27 years. Vickers, 20 with no parole. The others got anywhere from 5 to 15. Restitution was ordered. Several neighborhoods, including ours, received settlements. Our attorney helped file a class action civil suit that ensured victims would see real compensation, even if it took years. Back home, the neighborhood changed. The fences that once divided us now connected us. We met. We shared. We organized a real HOA, this time with oversight, transparency, and community votes. Carla was elected president. I was asked to help with digital security. At first, I hesitated. I'd bought this house for peace, not politics. But then Hannah said something that stuck with me. If we want to protect what's ours, we can't wait for someone else to do it. We are the line now. Life slowly returned to normal. We repainted the nursery, replaced the broken railing, burned the old fake violation letters in a fire pit out back. Hannah gave birth to a healthy baby girl. We named her Hope because she came in the middle of darkness, but reminded us that light doesn't surrender. And as I held her for the first time, I realized something. This house wasn't just a structure. It was a battleground, a place we defended, not with bullets, but with truth. And now, it was finally ours. 6 months later, the neighborhood looked the same, yet everything had changed. The lawns were still manicured. The mailboxes still lined up neatly. Kids still pedaled their bikes around the cul-de-sac. On the surface, it had returned to its suburban calm. But if you looked closely, you could feel the shift. People made eye contact now. They waved, not out of politeness, but solidarity. There were no more anonymous notes, no creeping figures in black, no hidden agendas behind every mailbox. We were no longer strangers living beside each other. We were survivors who had stood our ground together. Hannah healed slowly. The fracture in her arm took time, but the emotional wounds took longer. There were nights she still startled in her sleep, clutching her stomach, even though the baby was now safe in our arms. There were mornings she'd stare at the porch for a few seconds longer than usual, just watching, just checking. But she never lost her spirit. If anything, she became stronger. She began journaling, joined a group for trauma survivors, volunteered to help others facing HOA abuse. She turned her pain into purpose, not just for herself, but for others who never got the chance to fight back. And when our daughter, Hope, arrived, everything changed again. She came screaming into the world, fists clenched, lungs full of fire. She was perfect, holding her in that hospital room. I remember thinking, they tried to take this from us, and we didn't let them. We had a sign made for the front of our house. Just one word. Ours. It wasn't just about ownership, it was about survival, about claiming something back that had been nearly stolen. Not just brick and wood, but peace, security, and trust. I'd spent so much time fortifying the walls, installing cameras, clutching weapons, and waiting for shadows that I forgot what we were actually protecting. A place to raise our child, a place where she could laugh without fear. Now, finally, that place felt real. I still carry the scars, though. Sometimes I find myself walking the perimeter of the property without even realizing it, checking corners, scanning rooftops, listening for tires on gravel that don't belong. But there's no shame in that. Because now I know safety isn't something that just exists. It's something you protect, something you fight for. Not just with weapons, but with truth, community, and when necessary, with fire. A few weeks ago, I stood in front of a group of local homeowners at a town hall. They'd invited me to speak, not as a hero, just as someone who'd lived through hell and refused to be quiet about it. I told them everything: the scam, the fear, the system failure, the guns, the courts, the victory. And then I said, don't be afraid to question authority. Don't assume every badge is real. Don't give up your voice because the envelope looked official. Evil wears suits now. It files paperwork. It knocks politely. But if you stand together, it loses. They clapped. Some cried. A few came up to thank me. One woman hugged me so tightly I thought she might break my ribs. Her HOA had just tried to fine her for planting a fig tree. Sometimes late at night, I sit on the porch with hope in my arms. The air is quiet. The lights are soft. Hannah hums a lullaby from the kitchen. The wind moves gently through the trees. And in those moments, I understand something I didn't before. Peace isn't the absence of threat. It's the strength to face it and keep living anyway. So, if you ask me what happened, why I pulled that trigger, why I stood my ground, why I took on a system no one else wanted to challenge, the answer is simple. Because I had to. Because when evil came to my door, dressed like order, speaking with authority, and reaching for my wife, I made sure it never got a second chance. And now, we sleep easy. Not because the world is safe, but because we're finally ready when it isn't. If this story shook you, if it made you angry, made you think, or made you realize how quickly safety can become an illusion, then you need to hear more. Because this isn't just one story. This is happening in neighborhoods across the country, and it might already be happening in yours. Subscribe to the HOA Stories, where we expose the dark side of neighborhood control, share real cases of abuse and injustice, and give voice to the families who fought back. These aren't just stories. They're warnings. Bell, hit that subscribe button. Speech balloon, share your own experience in the comments. Red heart, and remember, silence feeds power. But truth fights back.